Hemshech Chaim Beis, Volume 1, the end of Maimer, Discourse 39, Chapter 157. So 157 concludes a subject that began all the way back in Chapter 130, where the Rebbe Rashab began to explain the difference between Hamshacha the Avis and Shacha Matan Torah. The difference between the work of the Avis, the father, the patriarchs, and what Matan Torah Sinai generated. Which that in turn came to explain, coming to explain rather, the difference between the Er Makif, the effect of the Er Makif, Er applicable, which causes bittul in existence, and the effect of the Er Pnimi, the immanent energy, which causes existence to be. You need both elements. So, in explaining it, the Rebbe Rashab cited the verse, the pasuk in Parsha Ve'era, where Hashem, God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ve'era el Avram Yitzchak Yaakov Kel Shaddai Shmi Havai Elena Daitiva. The Torah says very specifically that the revelation was of a particular level, Kel Shaddai, and not Havai. Though we find Havai by the others, even before Matan Torah. So clearly, from the pasuk, you have to say that's not the Havai that God is referring to in that chapter. As he explained, that's Havai that's filtered and affected by other names. So all names are rooted in Shem Havai. Shem Havai is basically saying God. But there's different names that manifest different dimensions of the divine presence, divine energy. And briefly, Kel Shaddai, he refers to the name Shaddai, the word Dai, bringing the Medrash back there, he said Dai. The Medrash says, Kel Shaddai, Anihu Shamati Leilomi Dai. Dai Shaddai is referring to God saying, I said to my worlds, enough. And he explained, you can't be saying that the world is saying enough, because the world itself is Dai. It is already, it's finite, it's finite. It's referring to the divine energy that God is saying to his own divine energy. It's like essentially the brakes. It's a regulated flow of divine energy that Dai only go that much and not more. Because if you go more, it'll destroy the universe. That's what he said there. Wrote back from the Gemara and Medrash. I'm reading from chapter 130 right here. I'm referring to that. So, Shiluli Shamati Dai, Ada Tahayim Nimtochim. That if I had not said Dai, if God did not regulate that flow, the universe existence, heaven would have completely melted away. Okay. Oh, what, you're right. Sorry, yeah. The other opposite would have been split. Right. We had Bola clock. The world would have been clear as Bola clock. Keep thinking everything needs melt. That's not being bad.
Something's stopping.
So he explained there that's basically the power of Kavod Rebbe, that's Tzimtzum HaRishon. And that is what the Ovis accomplish. That, the Shaddai itself is not enough, because that just tells you that God limited the flow. So he went on to explain that Shaddai has many other meanings, including Adli Dai, including Shaddai from the word breasts that are nourishing, including Shaddai from the word Shidut Hamarachis, which is shattering the natural parameters. And all that was to come to explain that Shaddai is not just limitation, limited flow, but it is essentially, it is bringing the energy into existence to the maximum without completely annihilating it. So even Shidut, from the word Shidut, explains with the nisim that are concealed in nature. There's the different interpretations in Shaddai. All basically teaching us how the Er HaGvul, its maximum is what the Ovis achieve, to bringing back existence to where its natural, healthy place is. And now in chapter 157, he sums it up and explains it with that same Gemara. Dai machsere, enough to fill the lack, even if it's abundance relative to the person that he needs a horse to ride on, or his custom, his routine, his habit was particular comforts, so he receives that, but not more than that. The iyat mechuyev lashre, iyat chayev lashre, which means mechuyev lashre. You're not responsible to make him wealthy. What is Esher? So this chapter explains Esher. Shirus is not just abundance, but unlimited abundance. Spirituality, this is the level, as he said, of Zoh, from Moira Er. Sheyesh li kesef rav machsadim, that has much kesef, a lot of silver. So it has the level of Atik, a higher level of Kesef, which refers to the 400 silver, so-called homes, dwelling, the abodes where the tzaddikim dwell in the world to come. That's Atik. Einig atzmi built in Murgish. Completely unconscious, unconscious and deep pleasure that's not even sense. Explain that Seicher, that's the level of Arich, the lower level of Kesef, and the lower level of Atik. Over the Seicher, which is Kesef, is the higher level, and that is Nimshach in Das, in Osher El Das Elyon. Das Elyon, which is the higher perspective. Das Elyon, as he explained, is a keli for previous Kesef, like he said, the Das is not counted, Kesef is counted. Das replaces Kesef, basically. This goes back now, that's Ashirus. That's how the Etzem of Atzilus is. The Etzem of Atzilus is able to access that. Previous Chacham was able to access previous Atik. However, the others, they drew down from Arich, from Reshis and Makar Shtalshlus. Essentially, they went back to the source and brought all the energy they could, but it's still connected to existence. So it's as much as existence as possible to achieve on its own, basically. It would be almost like I mentioned about Matan Torah, and we count 49 days, that's as much as we can do. The day 50, we don't count. But when we count 49, we're able to achieve 50, the 50th gate. So everything in life is basically, if you want to say the Avos of Matan Torah in simple terms for us, is someone does whatever they possibly can do. You've done every effort you can do to your maximum. That's the Avos. Then, there's a revelation from above, a new power that you can't achieve on your own. That's Matan Torah. So what does it mean in Shtalshlus? That means you reach Arich. You can reach, this is the root of Shtalshlus. The beginning, you can go back to from the pipes, you can go to the mouth of the well. But not further. Because your whole existence comes from that place. How could you go beyond it? So beyond it requires a Hamshacha from above. So what the others did was the maximum that you can go to the root. The best possible thing that existence can do with its own powers. Obviously, you could say its own powers. God also gave them power. But we're talking about God giving them power, but it's still on their own, and manifest in their natural skills. Avram was a great man. It wasn't just God chose somebody and he became Avram. Avram searched and seeked through his own efforts until he reached high levels and he reached Kel Shaddai. But Shmi Havaya Eloina Daiti Lehem. That needs a particular revelation. And it doesn't say specifically, but it's very clear that without the others, we'd never get to Shmi Havaya. If you don't go to Arich, you're not getting to Atik. Like if you don't go to 49, you're not getting to 50. Matan Torah would not have happened and you didn't have the preparation of the generations before that. Like so-called, like in our work, it's like the chinuch. Without the education, you don't have the training and preparation for the next stage. He doesn't explicitly state it, but it's implicit that in order to climb the ladder, you have to climb from the bottom up. So that's what the others did. Okay. And that's Kel Shaddai, and that's the Hascholas HaYichud of Matan Torah. The Rizal says that the beginning of the unification that happened in Matan Torah, the beginning of Revelation began with the others. Because they brought out the Kusan world, they brought Bittlings to the world, but their primary work was above, not Tzilus. Even though they revealed the godliness down below, but the primary achievement was above because they were still not going all the way to the place that creates transformation. They went to a place that creates revelation, but not transformation. They set the stage, so the next stage, they're the beginning, actually does say, that's Chol Seichel, so it's clear that they prepared the ground. And that brings to Tishmei Havaya, he says, Ani Havaya, that was revealed to the Yidden by Matan Torah. It's not just Dai Balakusei, Shem Havaya, that's already a Gilui that has no limitations, true bleak Vuch. So as opposed to a Harim Yamushu, about voice, to Meteno, now we're talking about Chazdi Vitach Lo Yomushu, Bris Shlemi Lo Tom. So you're dealing with a level that's coming higher. The others are the Harim, are like hills. That's Chesed of Atzilus. What do you say? You saw of Atzilus, rather. You saw it. That's Lamayla. And Bris Shlemi is Yisod Sheba Atzmos, that creates a yichud down below, all the way down below, that transforms this world. So both are levels of Yisod. One is what he says called Yisod, is Bris Shlemi, yeah. But that one still is Yamutu. Yamusha, rather. This one will never disappear. It will never, what do you call it, never erode, never diminish. Yeah. So mountains erode. And now, with this said, he's going to conclude the Maimer of Pinchas, and answering the questions. So if you remember, the questions were, I'll just refresh the questions. The questions were, by Pinchas, Heshavas Chamasim al B'nai Yisrael. And B'nai Yisrael B'ris Yishalom. Pretty clear, B'ris. Just finishing here with B'ris Yishek, B'ris Yishalom. All the questions, Mashmosin, well, that it's mashma. It appears from the pasuk that Pinchas received the reward of the covenant of shalom, of peace, completion, because he not subsided. I'd say Heshivas Chamasim. He settled or calmed down the anger. Quieted. Yeah, Barui, quieted. Yeah. Chamasim that God had on the Jews after what happened with Zimri. Happened in the Parsha Bo. So that's what's masked. Because he did that, that's why he got this award. So the question is, and the Medrash Rabbi he brought, I'm sorry, Meshuv Chema, Ben Shal Meshuv Chema, Ben Shal Ab. The Medrash says that the one Meshuv Chema, which is Pinchas, Ben Elazar, Ben Aaron. That why does the pasuk say that he's the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron? Because he's the son, just like he, what do you say, calmed, quieted the anger. So did his grandfather Aaron do it by bringing ketevus. That's what the Medrash says. So the question is, what's the relationship? What's the connection? What's the connection from Pinchas resolving, Pinchas quieting down God's anger, and Aaron's quieting down? So that's, now he's going back to that. Al Pi Hanal Yuvan, I'm reading page 310. The end of the chapter, the end of the Maimer, which is, as we've said many times, the discourse was written without the beginnings and ends primarily, and then later the Rashab added these endings and beginnings. Now this is the end of Pinchas. So he says like this. Al Pi Hanal Yuvan, according to the above, we'll understand, Mashakasa Pinchas ben Elazar, Heshav is Kamosa ben Yisrael. The Pinchas, the son of Elazar, he quieted the anger, the wrath, the divine wrath unto the children of Israel. In the Isa B'Zoya,
actually, the little translation means he turned away the wrath from the Albanites from the Jewish people.
Heshiv is turned away. Yeah, Heshiv means like Shuvah, like turn.
He turned away the wrath from the Albanites from upon the Jewish people.
Okay, fine.
He redirected it.
Yeah, but then where to go?
Back to the source.
No, but Heshiv here, I will not translate it like that. Heshiv doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean he redirected it. Heshiv means he removed it, basically.
Yeah.
He stopped it, he subsided it, put the word, he resolved it, or, what does we say? In the Isa B'Zeh, because now it says in Zayah, the Pinchas in his Galgal, the Pinchas in his Galgal, Nishmas Nadav Avir. And Pinchas was reincarnated, the Neshama of Nadav and Avir, were the two sons of Aaron, who were consumed as they brought Keteris on the day the Mishkan was erected, and they went in and got burned out, basically. The Eish Zara, first burnout in history.
First and last?
No, I wanted the story.
The last.
Pinchas happens late. This is the Shchedish.
This has happened after the 40 years.
There's a different opinion. No, but it definitely happened on the way Bolach. What if it came from already entering its soul?
Next?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
38, 39 years.
That's next week. That's what the Shmini.
Right.
By Yodin Nistaknu, and through him, through Pinchas, repaired the mistake, or is he going to call it the sin of Nadav Aviv? The Hineched Nadav Aviv. So in other words, that's what it says in Zayah. Nadav Aviv went in with his passion, as we know, into the Mishnah, and he got burned up. As a result, it was, of course, a big event. And Pinchas was their Gilgal. He was the Gilgal of their Neshama, which is clearly that Nadav Aviv had a similar Neshama, because it doesn't say it's not Neshama, they had a similar soul, and that soul reincarnated into Pinchas, and Pinchas repaired their mistake. What was the mistake? So now you explain it.
Eliyahu was alive when Matan Torah.
So on.
So that means that these people died after Matan Torah.
So Gilgal does not mean that you have to be born. Gilgal can be a neshama that can come into a person.
Really?
I would call Gilgal there. Gilgal call it Gilgal.
Really? In other words,
You wouldn't?
like
Yeah, but they were alive. They were alive by someone.
Gonna have to be born after the other guy passed away.
It's
Basically.
Galgal. It says plenty. It's Galgal. That means it was like,
No, so he was assuming that his Galgal means that it's only into a child.
no, it was like they.
so one day we can go walking down the street, we
It's
pick up
Galgal.
another Neshama.
Went into him.
There's different things. There's a thing called Ibur. There's a thing called Gilgal. There's a thing called a Dibuk.
So that we know about. So that's what we
So that happens to you every day, no?
We say it every day now. It's Sfeis Hayom, we say it.
Actually, I became a grandfather, yes.
Even if you're not
When we
best
say the
friend.
Nasi, but when we say the Nasi in Nissen, when we say the Nasi, why do we say Nasi of Levi? It brings from my young name brings it because everybody has. There's a Gilgal, a Gilgal, but a Chibur. There's other levels. In Tanya, for example, it says Aben Mit, Miyad Allah Ruach Mamar, and Lamed, and Yizechet to a Neshama B'Tzadik. Definitely midlife. It's not that he dies, God forbid.
Life crisis.
Then Mashiach, what about Mashiach? It's not Mashiach very specifically, it'll be a person's generation. Then there'll be an additional. Look, what do we know about souls? Souls are not cereal. You know that once it's Cheerios, it's not another thing. The soul is a spiritual entity, spiritual energy. So why can't you say that the source of souls, new energy, enters into our soul? That's what Mullah means.
So
Let's demystify it.
So sometimes you see a big change on somebody, you can assume something.
It doesn't happen every day. This happens where it says it happens. You can't just say this on your own. If you see a change in somebody, it may just be their mood. I don't necessarily attribute everything to a guilt.
Is that very rare thing, or just something that
I know
happens?
the word very rare. When the Torah says it happens,
That we
does
know,
not.
but that we know, but you know.
it's not common. You need a real shift in the code, in the source code for this. Why would it happen? It doesn't happen by accident.
It's a
The
program.
person really worked hard, and their avodah reached a level. They achieved this. It doesn't just happen. Nothing happens with by accident. Why would something like this happen?
It happens
Unless
every generation, a few times.
Look, you have Rabbi Yechon Kain Gadol. He was Yeshiva 80 years, and 80 years he came into Turkey. It says. And it said, Rizal says that so what happened with his 80 years of not 80, all the years of his avodah?
He's a tzaddik for all these years.
60 years at least, maybe a little less. He went in without one aved. I don't know how old he was when he became a kohen. Not at one.
No, but before that, he was
It means that in that 1 year, Kodesh Kedoshim did not spit him out. So it means that he was at that level. So we're not getting into how that happened, what exactly happened at 80. But the question is, where does that all that avodah go? So there's also the question the other way around. Rabbi Elazar ben Dodaya, the Gemara says that there was no sin that he didn't taste of. And then the last second of his life, he bent down and he cried out to God. And that's the expression that he acquired his world to come. 1 hour. So the Rizal says, the power of tshuva, you understand, the power of tshuva can transform somebody in a second. But how does he kain elamid? What does he have? You have to have a vushim to be makabel there. It's like, so a person transformed, he goes up now to heaven, doesn't have the kalim, he didn't do anything. Like you say, what do you say, lam chatir b'chayach. You have to have hamud b'yadim. It's like someone could be zeichel, but he didn't go to school. How's he going to learn Torah? He doesn't know how to read Hebrew.
What about Sternis Naskis?
Well, that's the power of the transformation. But what, he doesn't have the actual ideas and so on.
I guess it's
The
time.
Levushin, that's the expression.
I guess it's time.
So the Arizal's answer is that the Neshama of Rabbi Yochanan and Kain Gadol went into the Elizabeth to die. So what happens is two things. The Tshuva obviously achieves major thing. But you need Levushin. Command the other Lay Amrina. You can't, the same question is asked about Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah when we say that he became like Shikashivim Shana. Was it help? The beard got white? Was that a trick? Did he get the wisdom? He didn't have the wisdom.
Could have just put
You know,
powder.
Yeah, exactly. Because it doesn't make it. It wasn't just to show that he looks like a sage, not an image thing.
Well,
Yeah, that's quite. But okay, because he got the wisdom, that's why he looked like a Zok. Not because it was not a.
So did the tshuva help the both of them?
Paint your beard white.
Did the tshuva help the both of them?
Shmuel died at 52 and he was 18 when he said that. So that's
Exactly. So Gilgal answers a lot of these questions in many situations.
There's a story in Circle of Complex 2 days.
Look, there are others, there are Mali Nigla that don't believe in the Gilgal.
Don't believe in Gilgal.
They say it's not correct, but it's a Kabbalistic concept. But you can't answer a lot of Mamar Chazal without Gilgal.
Can't answer the whole.
The Rebbe has actually one of the Shiva calls, I think, the Rashab, where he talks about it. Like for example, he talks about Pinchas.
What the
There's the
Rashab?
expression Pinchas Eliyahu. How do you explain that without Gilgal? Understand? And there's a lot of Chazal that Nigla that you can't explain without the concept of Gilgal, which is the proofs that Gilgal is even al pi Nigla. But there were other opinions that they didn't recognize Gilgal. They didn't hold from it, or whatever you want to say.
But I just heard
There's svarim on this.
I just heard a story.
The point,
I just heard a story recently on Shabbos about somebody from Dal Rebbe's times. That they had cancer, his mind and everything, and died young, and Dal Rebbe said he was the Neshama of the Rebbe's time.
okay.
What's the difference between Hebrew and Gilgal?
It's not for now. It's a long other discussion. I'm just going to explain the minor here. Since he didn't mention Hebrew, and again, maybe he brings it back Hebrew and Gilgal. It's other things.
It's one of the ways I think you explain the holocaust.
If you ever say for Shal Gilgulim, there's a whole chapter on this. You read the Shal Gilgulim, where there's goes through the whole science of Gilgulim. It's actually easy to understand. Ironically. No, because he speaks a very simple, very straight language. Sham Nefeshot, Sham Chaychid, what a Gilgal is, what's Hebrew. He explains it in very, very, very clear language. I mean, I'm not talking now the Havana of the spiritual levels, but the technicalities are not difficult. There's a tzfas, what is it, Ascent has a thing called Kabbalah Online or something. I think they have translation of Shal Gilgal in English online. You can go through that, as all the questions, Gilgal, Hebrew, all the different types of scenarios that are possible. Look, in most cases, besides when you say the Alter Rebbe or others, we're not Neshamas Chadashim, so all of us are a Gilgal of a previous soul. That's a given. That's not neglect, we're born that way. And they were finishing the work. A Gilgal is essentially the concept of, think of it as a cosmic immune system. When a job is given and you're not done, you come back to finish it. It's quite logical, actually. The Shama came down and didn't finish what it had to do. It missed a mitzvah, or it hurt somebody, so it has to come back to repair. Once it comes back, it doesn't mean once it's done, it leaves. There are instances like that too. But it could also be that you have more than one shlichus. It doesn't mean it's only to repair. It could also be given more than one job. You could be zeichet to new things. There are people who came down just to finish something, and once they were down, they did bigger things. And God gave them more life to continue a mission. But these are mysteries. These are things that are, the Rebbe writes to some of the women. There's one or two stories, the real tragedies, children killed in car accidents and stuff like that. There's a few long letters, answers from the Rebbe to mothers about this. The Rebbe said, we don't know about souls. What we do know is precedents. We can take them a precedent, but we can't know for sure. Because unless we're told, you don't know who's a Gilgal of what. But the Rebbe brings that and says that in precedent, there are cases where clearly a soul comes down just to finish a certain thing, and then when it finishes, it goes back to the service. Not that it's less of a tragedy, but at least it's a certain consolation. You say this about this, not the son of the Tzemach Tzedek. How old was he?
9. He was 9 years old.
Ram said he was genius and he had non-believable. I think he said the Alter Rebbe, right?
He was the Neshama of the Alter Rebbe?
Yeah, to finish something. I think that was what was said. I don't remember. the Rishimus. Anyway, so that's basically what Gilgul is. Since you asked Ibur by definition, Gilgul means cycle, like the circle. So that still is the process. The Gilgul, the first place Gilgul is mentioned is Zohar. The Rebbe spoke about it the Shabbos after the Rebbe Simcha Mishka passed away. It's Parsha Mishpatim. So the Zohar says, El HaMishpatim, Shatasim Lefneichem. So he says, what's El HaMishpatim? What are the laws? So the Zohar says these are the laws of Gilgul. The whole thing of Eved Ivri and Amei Ivri is all Pnimi Satela Gilgul. Yeah. So the whole Parsha Mishpatim really, the Rebbe spoke about it. He brings it from the Zohar that this is the Mishpatim, the rules, the laws of Gilgul. So the Zohar Parsha Mishpatim has pages and pages of Gilgul, and the Arizal explains it. So Gilgul is really cycle. What means a cycle? Gilgul is a wheel. What's a cycle? The cycle how souls, the people reincarnation, not really the right translation of Gilgul. Gilgul really means a cycle. So it's like I said, the immune system. It's how souls continue their journey and return and go through different stages, different transitions to fulfill the mission that they were sent. That's what Gilgul means. Ibur is a particular type of manifestation, like called pregnancy. So Ibur means sometimes some Ibur will enter somebody like not the full soul, partial, part-time. Ibur is far less than Gilgul. Gilgul is the real cycle. Ibur is more of could be for a period of time. It could be attach itself. It could be like the word Ibur means. It's like a baby, like a child inside of a womb. So you're already there, but you get something else. You get something new.
That person can carry around this other soul.
But look there what I told you in Arizal. Arizal has a Shar Gilgulim and a Sefer Gilgulim. I'm by no means an expert in Gilgulim, but I read through those five. They're very interesting. They're quite wild, actually. When you read them, the Arizal actually tells his Talmidim who's a Gilgul of whom. A little chilling. Not chilling. It's a little, when you read it, you're taken aback. It's like literally it says names and generations, and this happened to this one. You know, like very, very.
It's going to some from animals and Chita and stuff like this.
No. The Gilgul in animals is more of a punishment, and doesn't really talk about that too much. It talks more about people who went through different traumas in life. It explains that your life's traumas are based on that. So you have to know how to read it with understanding it with balance, because if you start reading it literally, you start saying, "Oh, that's what happened to me." That's why I said you have to be very careful. When the Arizal says what he says, it doesn't mean everybody can apply it. It's not based on logical rules. Someone who knows. Someone who can see a soul, can understand that this soul, what it's gone through. He was able to tell them what their souls went through, what their tikkun is. But you're dealing with responsible people. The Arizal was talking to people who were dealing themselves. And when they heard it, they didn't get, it wasn't a crystal ball. They went and they understood their avodah in a new way. What they have to do. All these things are meant to lead to responsibility. It doesn't lead to responsible action. It's Bobomaisis. It's sensationalism. Exotica, they call it. People love the exotic. They want to know which one guy says to me, I don't have ants in my pants. I want to know if I was a grasshopper in the previous life. It helps you understand yourself. It also, for many people, it also takes away from it. A lot of astrology is all about taking over. Like, oh, what can I do? I was an alcoholic in 5 lifetimes. I can't help myself. That type of thing.
You're being pulled into different directions. Things get two different shows.
It's all about responsibility. It doesn't lead to responsible behavior. And this is why these things are not talked about. Not because we don't talk about them, because there's plenty of svarim about it. But we don't talk about dreams, about palm reading, about face reading, about stars, about Gilgulim. Because as they say, those that say don't know, and those that know don't say. That's the general rule. Especially if someone says and also charges money, that is, you could rest assured it's most likely has other agendas going on. But it feeds into people's needs. Look at Manhattan. How many every second store is a psychic? The people go online. I heard after pornography, astrology sites. Horoscope is the second biggest genre.
It's in the Gemara though.
It's interesting how it's
the whole Gemara is
Torah is down to the bottom.
No, wait, it's in Torah. Astrology.
I just said, but you heard what I just said about it?
Yeah.
Torah, so what? But most people don't know. That's why is it not talked about? The Rebbe never talked about it. He came to the Rebbe and said, "Tell me my Gilgal. I can't see you're not getting an answer so fast. If she was nice, we'll kick you out of the office, but not, say go figure out what your shlichus is. Be responsible. Come back and talk about Gilgal. It's about responsibility. There's no magic tricks. That's why it's be very careful. Even the Arizal, these things you don't just. You may know this. The Chidor writes about this. When the Arizal passed away, when the Rebbe Chaim Vital, who wrote all the Torah of Arizal, he passed away. He had all the writings buried with him. You read this? They say primarily because of the Shah of Gugul and the Sefer Gugul. People wouldn't relate. If you read it, you'll see it's quite. If you saw someone wrote the.
Why would he bother writing it
you
down?
think he's the biggest tzaddik, or you think I don't want to say the other extreme.
Why would he bother writing it down if he's going to have it buried with him?
First of all, he read it and Talmidim read it. He showed it to Shalah. The real deal read it. They knew it, but he buried it. His son Shmuel Batal had to make a whole Hakaras Neder. He went to the grave. It was a whole mess.
They dug it up.
You can't just dig it up. A man says to bury it. It's a tzavor of a nest, and also a tzaddik. You don't just.
It's physically scary.
They had to bring a bezdin. The whole thing. He was Matan Neder. On the reason being, because this Torah is so valuable, and the world needs to hear about it. The world, and Gilead needs to be there. It's a big thing. It's part of like Yifut Shema Nesechta. That Hakaras Neder was a major thing. The Arizal, Kisra Arizal would not have been. Right, it was not right. It was short time out. The Chidor writes the whole story. He went and they took it out, and that's when we have it. The Arizal's writings are beyond. You can see right away. It's either someone who wrote this. I don't want to say the negative. It's either an unbelievable soul or it's somebody completely.
Right.
It's not neutral. It's unbelievable.
It's extreme.
The Gulgulim, just read it, you'll see what I mean. He literally, it's like someone saying names that says Gulgulim. Eitz Chaim is more esoteric, about Tzimtzum and so on. Even that is pretty wild if you read it, you see it, like where he comes. But Arizal was a man of complete mystery. He only, they only knew of him a year and 8 months.
He died at 36.
He only taught for a year and 8 months?
He grew up in Mitzrayim. He was the Talmud of the Shittim Mekubetzes. And then he
The
came.
Shittim Mekubetzes was a Kabbalist?
Also, but he was the Talmud in Nigla.
Uh-huh.
Tzala, what was the Shittim Mekubetzes' name?
There are 2 shuls for the
He went for Yerushalayim, that is, they say they couldn't sell Yerushalayim. They said the clip was too strong. Not Kedusha.
So he went to
He went to Tzfas.
and he had one.
He came to Tzfas. Tzfas was the center of some of the greatest.
People and 1 people for the 9.
No. What are you saying?
Just joking.
There was no one against him.
No,
There was only one Maram. Maram Shik. He was skeptical until he saw more. Remember from a distance.
And Shabbos shul and
The thing with Arizal was absolutely impossible to understand because he came to a town, Tzfas. There were Gedalim all over in this little town, Beis Yosef, Shmuel College. Who wasn't there? The Ramak. Shalom came later. Shalom was not there.
They were all alive at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was immediately called Ish Eliki.
Greatest generation.
Ish Eliki, everyone called a man of God. Not we're talking about simple people. We're talking about daily Yisrael.
Wow.
And the people who were older than him, who came to, Ramak was the biggest Kabbalist in the Tzfas, the biggest. He became his Talmud. He was old. And Ramak is itself a giant in Kabbalah. You see his story. Something, and remember, it's only a year and 8 months. It's like one thing if you know a person over the years. And you don't find this in history. In history, everybody argued with everybody. Nobody's accepted it. Either Rambam or Sfarim were burned. There was big criticism of the Rambam. The Rambam wrote things that were very... So the fact that he was so accepted, you have to say there was something so godly it was impossible to deny. And people who were themselves godly recognized it. And that's that. You see, you read the Chiddush. I'm not talking about today. Right in his time. It's not like a myth that was built over the years. In his time. And there's a Gadol and Nigla and Gadol. You could see, if you run the Kabbalah, as you see his godliness, you see his Bekias and Gemara, It's impossible to.
From the quoting of Maimar
Because you see, he knows because he explains Kabbalah in Gemaras. In Halacha, he'll bring Shari mitzvahs. He'll take a mitzvah, and every diuk of the mitzvah, Pi Nigla, will explain. So you see that, it's unbelievable. And most he didn't write that result. Everything was written by Chaim Vital, and Saul Saruk was another student who then went to Europe. And it was a different school of thought.
How many Svarim is it?
Exactly.
How many
Not
Svarim
as
is
much,
it?
not the Baal Shem Tov was like that. Baal Shem Tov didn't write almost that. Svarim that today we have 20, 30.
Of the Arizal, Kisper whatever?
There's the Shemona
And that's all from 20 months.
Wow.
And
What did he do? Just spoke constantly?
I don't know, because it also says he spent all week on the Kinetic in a boat learning and davening. And he only come home for Shabbos.
So
He had two
Shabbos-
shuls.
I don't know when
He had a
was
weekday
exactly.
shul. No, he had a Shabbos shul and a weekday shul. One was Ashkenaz.
I can tell you, I went to Tzfas once, and I was at the Rizal's, by the old cemetery there. The
Yeah.
Rizal's mikveh.
Yeah.
You can still feel the Rizal's presence there. It's like it's
It's a
down there.
spiritual place.
Sure. It's as crazy as it gets. It's not a place to live.
That's what happens at Spot.
Yeah. Everybody there. It's a very spiritual place. And I was there, and I see a guy there, an older guy. He's like, just asked him, by the way, do you know why some of these kfarim are blue? There's some blue kfarim. I went to. So he started giving me a whole history. He's the caretaker of the cemetery. He's a Ben Acher Ben. His great grandfather. He's as fast as 400 years.
Wow.
And the Arizal was how long ago?
400 years ago.
Oh, that's
From the
it.
Arizona?
Not him. He said to me, I'll tell you something that I heard from my father, who heard from his father, goes all the way back. All of me personally. He said, just a story. And I saw the guy was for real. Didn't tell me a story. It was not such a miraculous story. It's a very nice story. Now, Rizal would be, when he was learning most of the week, he'd come home for Shabbos. He would walk through the streets. Everybody covered their face. Because he could see through faces. He could read your face. He felt completely vulnerable.
Wow.
Everybody would cover their face with Rizal. That's what he done.
Wow.
He said, he heard from his father told me, he heard from his father, it's like Kabbalah all the way back. I mean, I have no reason not to believe it's not.
We had the Shabbos that, but
Not children.
Well, that was good. Yeah,
Swedish by that, but
I think that, they were not, I don't know what happened to them. I think, I'm sure you.
That's nuts.
Yeah, well, this comes, and there is not only that, I mean,
He's the only
you know how much halacha is affected today by the Rizal, the Mogen Avram. These things that we do, most of Kabbalah Shabbos is Friday night davening is half based on about that period. The whole stuff. Anyway, why am I mentioning this? Because Rizal could do it.
No, but it's good to know about that Arizal.
Something he's a study.
He's the only one that's
A
called.
study that a year and 8 months. It's unbelievable.
The only one they call him Arizal.
Oh,
Zal. It's a shame in the blood because it's bad if the people said he's still alive.
Aliyah Chai. They used to call Aliyah Chai. Look, I saw descriptions of him. You'll never believe descriptions. They call him literally Yisha Laki, things you don't use on anyone. Very, very high. Shalom, who was maybe one of the greatest. He lived in Krakow. He was one of the rabbis in Europe. He like the Ramban. Many of them tried to come to Israel at the end of their lives. So the Shalom came to the end of his life to Israel. He writes in his Sefer Shalom. And Shalom wrote, when he came to Israel, he wrote a siddur called Shara Shamayim, based on the Pasuk from Yaakov. When he came to Yerushalayim, so he writes that he met in Damascus, of Chaim Vital, that's where he lived. Damascus wasn't far from his house. And he showed him, he said, writings of his teacher. The Shalom writes these words. It's not my words. He writes, since Matan Torah, there has never been such a good. Shalom writes this. The Shalom is not some guy. You don't write things like that. He says, since Matan Torah, he writes there was no such a good.
Wow.
I
I
mean,
did
Shas, Mishnah. I mean, you're
I
talking
did
about Rishonim,
Rajvi.
Gehinim.
Rajvi.
That's what he writes. I'm telling you what he writes.
They called him Pnei Hashem.
I'm telling you what the Shalom writes is printed.
Pnei Adam.
Pnei Hashem.
Man Pnei Adam, don't Rashbi.
Adam.
But
Same
that's
idea,
what he
right?
writes. You see that from a man like the Shalom.
On Shabbos.
Not exaggerated. Be like the Rebbe saying that.
That was like,
You know,
so that was the first generation of like a much more widespread Kabbalah.
And then the Shalom actually incorporates in all his writings You can see it's like an addition. He changes all his writing based on what he sees. You can see he starts adding everywhere. Went back to, it looks like he went back to this whole sefer and added down his own. Because, so it's okay.
Stop eating
This
turkey.
means that the biggest Gedalim saw in the Arizal that you're talking here, not just a guy came with a new idea, that he was the real Torah, that he had a couple, it was clear that when he touched the Zayar, it was like he knew it. People who were experts knew this. But had like Moshe Kadavira could see in the Arizal that he was a Makubal that understood Zayar like no one ever understood, so where did it come from? Anyway, that's that. And also he unites everybody that Arizal. Sfardim, Ashkenazim, Snagim, Chassidim. The Arizal is holy like everybody. There's no one that the Arizal is not. Alright? There should be two actually. Those two. Only two. There's their Shita, everyone has their Derech and so on. So if you find the Facebook page of the Arizal, Dan, he's a good guy to hang around. If we make your own cocktail party, we want to invite the Arizal, right? We want to have it. See, get to know this. I don't know if he'll have lunch with us. Okay, so the Hine is the Bezeh, the Pinchas of God and Ishmael and the Bavir, by day, by your day, stop. So Pinchas, they were repaired. What does that mean? The Hine Chet Nadav Avir, or Hayu K'Meshe Kosov. What was the sin of Nadav Avir? I know sometimes we don't call it a sin because there was no Isser yet. Have to drink. Yain V'Shecher Al Teish became later that they shouldn't drink. But clearly, it's still called a sin because they did get burned, they did die. Even though with good kavanas, but it's still considered a flaw, something. What was their mistake? So, K'Meshe Kosov B'Kivosem Ufnei Hashem Yamus. Like it says, by coming close to Hashem, Yamus and dying. Shehu Inyan. Shehu Inyan Arevus V'Nehimus. Arevus Nehimus. This actually is a language, I believe, from the Eira Chaim. What does it mean? They got closer to God and they died. Why? Because it's referring to the sweetness and the imus and the pleasantness that they experienced, an ecstasy, a state of ecstasy they experienced as they got closer. To the point that the nefesh, the spirit, tigal. Tigal is sometimes, you say like throwing up. Like that's a double as goes, like repulsed. Repelled. But tigal could also mean, also have connection to burn? That the soul
slides off. It like taps on, like it doesn't stay.
It says a nefesh esabasa. It sounds like that the nefesh basically overwhelmed the flesh. So the ecstasy was so deep. It's like the fire of the nefesh completely overwhelmed. I don't know if tigal can mean here also, like you said, gall from Nimus. That gall means bitter. Like not bitter, like a repulse. It's called the double gall. But I think tigal for some reason I remember tigal also meaning like burning. Gall. Okay, so it is. Maybe tigal nefesh sabasa. The fire of the soul became so that essentially like melted away the flesh. I gotta fit that in some.
No.
My word of the week.
So not the video, actually, the goof remained intact. It was like just the
So tikul nefesh sabasa. So how would you translate that? I have to look in the Yerachayim. It probably says. Okay. Anyway, that was what happened. What happened was something. Their arivus neighbors, their sweetness and the depth of their experience, the divine getting close. Basically, it could also be tikul nefesh, maybe the other way around, like you just said. Maybe it means completely expired from, like completely separated from. But see, tikul nefesh es habosar is what's not tikul nefesh min habosar.
Because of the lashon es habosar, I think it means despised, and he left.
The l'chayr ain't moving. So the l'chayr is not understood. Seemingly not understood. Why is this, such a state of ecstasy, considered a sin? Isn't this extremely high level of Aveda, exalted, lofty level, to the state of Kleis HaNefesh Mamish? What means Kleis HaNefesh? That the Nefesh, the Kleis is like the Lashon Kolayim, the expires complete, Mamish, literally. So why is this considered a chet? However, the Indian in this is the answer. By them, it was not according their intentions. It was not according to the true purpose that God wants.
That was their shlichus.
We just learned that in the previous chapter. Remember in the top of page Shinches, what happens with Toyu? Toyu is what? That's exactly intense energies. Remember we said Nadav is one example. Intense energies, very powerful energies. But they cannot be contained. Remember we said their bittul, even their bittul, he says, is not hanachas. It's not amitis hakavana. It's using the same language. And that's why the container shattered. So it was not the kavanah amitis, because it's Leila Toyah. God did not create the world. Leila Toyah didn't create in order that there should be, Toyu means chaos, hefker, vistkeit, emptiness. El l'tikun, el l'shavas yitzara, to settle, to civilize, to l'shavas yitzara. Disorder. Yeah, but here Toyu means more than disorder. Toyu means a state of like emptiness, or like basically like souls expiring instead of. He wants the Shavas Yitzhara. Shavas Yitzhara is settling in. The Shavas Yitzhara means settle in, civilize it, build.
Right.
How would you try the Shavas
So it was
Yitzhara?
so it was sort of selfish. They wanted to just have a great time.
To settle the world.
Settle the world.
To settle the civilization.
To inhabit.
They were going against the
Which means that after the Ratzah, after the yearning, the tension, after the ecstasy, after the strong longing for something higher, there should be shuv, return. Not just leave.
That was their kavanah to leave, actually, though.
Second, let's finish reading. The beginning, there has to be a Ratzah. There should be a longing. In a state of Kleis HaNefesh, that the soul is looking and aspiring and being drawn upward. That means that is the Ahava b'chol meidecha, not just cholav b'chol nafshecha. Chol meidecha. What's b'chol meidecha? With all your might, meaning even beyond your regular keches, go beyond shehu inyan eisen v'sein shamakim, which we also learned earlier. When we say eisen v'sein shamakim, is b'chol meidecha. That's when you're following God's will. That's the kavanah. So that's good. But here's where the problem is. But after then what starts is a whole thing of mitzvahs. Right? Responsibility. The whole thing.
So what's Shehu in Yinaisin and Sinner Shalmakim if it's not Kiyum Torah Mitzvahs? It says B'chol Me'itcha Shehu in Yinaisin.
The word says B'chol Me'itcha. We learned it earlier.
But that's the meaning of Ratzu.
Right, and that's what saying Shalmakim. That's a person doing what God wants. It's step one.
What's Sinner Shalmakim if it's not Kiyum and Torah Mitzvahs? And it says Yervachar.
What do you mean? That's stage one. That is part of God's will.
Stage two, they didn't do.
It seems like
The love brings about to do the Torah mitzvahs. The love brings about to do.
No, but there's two stages. One second. This is a Chomei Decha is a healthy and a necessary step.
It fuels it.
It's called Eisen
I'm asking a simple question.
I don't understand the question.
Shehu in Yinaisin and Sinner Shalmakim.
Right,
To me that means doing Torah Mitzvahs.
No, the Tain Shalom means God's will. God wants you to have Abba.
What's God's will?
No, God's will is that you should have Abba Chomei Decha. That's step one.
Okay, fine.
Then comes another thing. Then there's a Ratzon that the Shuri Kiyum Torah Mitzvahs. Shuv. The Ratzon of God is both Ratzon and Shuv. Both. First has to be Ratzon, longing. That's the Seder, the Shema. And then comes the Shuv. You bring it down to Torah Mitzvahs.
So this love is a predicate for Kiyum Torah Mitzvahs.
Well, see what since when is there's Abbas Hashem is also Ratzon Hashem.
It's a prerequisite to Kiyum Torah Mitzvahs.
It's not what he's saying here. He's saying that that's in Ratzon Hashem and then there's a step two. He didn't say the word prerequisite. It is prerequisite, you're correct. But what he's saying here is he's saying that they did not do according to the Kavanah. What's the Kavanah? She says, what's the order? B'tchila, first you need to have Ratzon. That's correct. You need to have that longing that they had. And then that has to come to Shuv and Kiyum Torah Mitzvahs. Kiyum Torah Mitzvahs here means, as I said, grounding. Mitzvahs that bring it down, not Ava. Ava b'chol medecha is going up. It's also a mitzvah. And it's also God's will. So that's Ratzeh going up, and then you have to bring it back down. The family, building a family, home, education, all the grounded mitzvahs. That's what he means here. When we say, for example, Kabbalas al Machar Shamayim, Kabbalas al mitzvahs. Similar, two things. They're both God's will. Even Kabbalas al Machar Shamayim obviously is, but it's more of a one level. Here he's talking about Ava b'chol meidecha, like we say in the Shema. Ava b'chol meidecha, and then comes the next level, which is the mitzvahs that it leads to. This is what we say. This is what we say. That we say after the next parasha. What is it? So it says that divrei teira kosim medal. That's talking about divrei teira. That you should advarim me'ela, meaning not stam advarim of divrei teira. These divrei teira should be so and so. The pasha Rishon Krishma, the first pasha of Krishma, Emrim Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. He's going back to the whole Davedik. He just brought down Hafta, and then now he's going back to Shema. Shema, first you say Shema, first pasha. The Isa Berikeach, the Berikeach writes, Berikeach is a sefer in Halach. The Gimel Shem is Hashem Elokeinu Hashem. What are the three names? You say Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad Hashem. Him ani rishon, v'ani yachid, u'mebol adai ein Elokim. I am the first, I am the last, and without me there is no God. Or besides me, there is no God. So you have three things. Ani rishon, l'lifnei hatzitz. This is not the Rekeach, I believe. This is the first. So three things. Hashem is ani rishon. Elokeinu is ani achrin, I guess. No, sorry. Hashem is ani rishon. The last Hashem is ani achrin. Mabode, and Elokim is the Elokim in the middle. So we're making a statement. We say Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Nishma, and God essentially encompasses all of it, from the beginning through the end and through the middle. So what does he say? What is it in levels in Lamayla? Ani rishon ulifnei hatzitz. Ani rishon means what is God saying? That I am the first and I am the last. What is it? There's no first and no last. There's no parts. So he's saying Ani rishon is the way it is lifnei hatzitz. That's the divine energy before the tzitz. V'ani achrin la'achar hatzitz. And I am the last, meaning achre hatzitz. U'bilodai b'emtza Isa ein Elokim hamastir. Without me, meaning without God, in middle there, in between, ein Elokim hamastir. Which means that there would be no power to conceal. That's what I think he means. Not that there's no concealment. There would be no Elokim to conceal. In other words, like this. Ani rishon is Ein Sof lifnei hatzitz. Ani achrin is Ein Sof, like the kav that comes after the tzimtzum. But there's a tzimtzum in between that conceals. So the body Ein Elokim, without me there would be no concealment either. I think that's what he's saying. You agree?
I'm still trying to formulate it.
I think that's what he's saying. Not Ein Elokim hamastir. Not that Elokim is not concealing. You could also interpret actually that way. You could say Ein Elokim hamastir. Mubelodai Ein Elokim. Here, Mubelodai, there's no gvura, there's no Elokim that conceals. You could also say that Elokim does not conceal without me, but he's saying without me there's no concealment. That's what I think he's saying. That's the three things. Hashem Elokeinu Hashem. Interesting. The Ein Sof Yachad U'Miyuchad Achar Hatzitz U'K'Mekedim Hatzitz. Because Ein Sof is one and united, completely united after the tzimtzum, like before the tzimtzum. The Atuhu actually nivre'elim, the Atuhu achash nivre'elim, this expression. There's no change in Ein Sof.
Nothing else is causing it. It's me.
That's what Pashas what he's saying. They're like hang v'reisa. I think that's what he's saying. Let me read the whole thing.
It's like another power that causes it.
Ein Elokim, right. So everything, both the Eid is from me and the Kelim are from me, essentially. That's what he's saying. That's what it looks like he's saying.
And the bush more like concealing.
What's that? But let's continue. So he's starting now saying, because the truth, it's not Ein Sof, there's no, there is Yachad and Meyuchad after the Tzimtzum, like before the Tzimtzum. Think of the teacher. the teacher conceals all his wisdom in order to give it over to a finite student. So there's a complete concealment. Then starts a slow flow that the student is hearing. That flow, from the student's perspective, is very different than what the teacher has in his mind. But from the teacher's perspective, what he's saying, even if he's saying Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, it's Yochad and Meyuchad with his wisdom. It's not some new entity. It's just that he's giving it in a diminished flow that the recipient can only hear Aleph, Beis. But the Aleph, Beis, from the teacher's point of view, is part of Yochad and Meyuchad with everything that that's in. That's what he's saying. Okay. The Atu Achale Nivre, the Atu Hu, that's expression. You are the one until you created the world. The Atu Achale, what's it? Nachle. You're the one that before you created the world, you're Atu, and you're the one after. What is that adding? Obviously, God is existent before and after, but it's the same God. Nothing changed. The same God that was there before existence is here now in existence. It's only the perspective from us that there's a different change. And the creation of the worlds that became a substance. That's only from a reflection of reflection alone. That's the second. So Shema Yisrael is saying Hashem before the Tzimtzum is one, Hashem after, and also the Elikim is not Elikim. Everything is coming from divine. Then comes Baruch Shem is saying, and now we're talking creation. Baruch Shem now there's an Elam, so that is all only a reflection. That's why Vod is only Chilufi Aspen. Okay. So that's the Achdus. He doesn't mention Echad, but that's what he means here. Echad. Shmei so Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So Hashem Elokeinu Hashem are all Echad. It's all one. It's an Achdus through and through. Then comes the next level of the world. The world is only coming from a reflection of all that divine energy. What's that mean? And Baruch Shem, that is he and his Kelim are one, which is only it's only the outer dimension of the energy, as we learned, that manifests in the outer Kelim. We learned that clearly. It manifests in the outer Kelim, out of the Yevugam Muichad. We learned that 2 chapters ago.
But we didn't say that was a ha'ar.
We did say it. Said it very
Though we said it about Chiyui.
No. We said that's ha'ara, not the etzem. The Fedish, I remember that. Very, very specific. Go back to chapter 150.
So you is etzem on both sides. Both statements.
Both of, I think it's back in chapter
You is etzem in both places, no?
I'm just looking, I want to see that expression. Maybe it's Chitzeni Seir, previous. Already, okay. Page 306, right? Yeah, Shema Teir, Shema Pa'ula. That's where it was. Yeah. Because Irving Gamuichad was how the air goes into the containers in order to create. Remember, to create a yesh, it has to be concealed. So you're talking here with Gamuichad. That's the outer dimension. The inner dimension of air is not. It's still connected to the source. That goes. Iyu Chayu goes the other way. The Chayui energies connect to Iyu all the way to the Eir HaBlikbu. Iyu Gamu is the other way, that the Keich HaGvul, or the Eir says the Mislabish and Kelim are one with the containers in order Shabahem Al Yodam Nivru. The containers are the instruments, remember. So Baruch Shem Kohen Malchus Leilam Bod is referring to the instruments that are united with this force, but they're only a reflection because it's how the divine is now expressing itself in creation. Not the divine to express whatever he is, Gligvul. It's not just expressing the divine, the source.
You is Ein Sof, right?
I know what Ein Sof means.
I almost knows.
Keich HaBlikvul, that's evil. Which level? Iyu v'chayu or Iyu v'garmui? It's two different Iyus.
Oh,
Iyu v'garmui has two meanings. Koyach hagvul or Eris that are in the containers. So now we're talking here a diminished flow, a reflection in order to create. In order to create, God has to conceal His infinite power, or else you don't have. That's Shaddai, or you don't have existence. Remember, He said in order for it to be a Yesh v'nifrit, if the Eir is completely in its full glory, no independent entity will arise. So Baruch Shem is referring, Shema is referring to the Abdus from above, like Yichud Ilah, essentially. Baruch Shem is Yichud Tatar. It doesn't say those words, but that's what it means. It's a reflection of. Okay, so it's a reflection. It's very consistent to what we learned before. Nothing new. Yeah. Okay, now. That's Mishnah is B'Chetzenis HaKelim. It doesn't say it, but mashma from here that Shema is Iyu v'chayu v'cha. Maybe not, I'm not sure.
Yes, it is mashma.
Yeah. When you contemplate on this, when you contemplate on the Shema, how Ein Sof is united and completely united and one. After the Tzimtzum, like before the Tzimtzum, and their creation is only from a reflection alone, from an outer reflection alone. Through this comes a longing, in your inner innards, the deepest kishkis, inward, etzem, an expiration. You're longing, you're reaching. You sense you're such awe of this fact that reality as we know it is meaningless. And that basically that the God reality is one throughout, and that all of existence is just a mere reflection. It causes a deep longing to be part of that reality.
so the Gloria Nefesh comes at Baruch Shem Kavod, because that's when you go down.
After Shema and Baruch Shem. After
Yeah.
both.
Wow.
Kamosha Kosu, Mili B'Shamayim, Im Chalei Chafaz. Mili B'Shamayim, what do I have in heaven? Im Chalei Chafaz. What do I have in heaven if I don't want you alone? Basically. Levadze she'enech chayfetz, the chitzenis elements. Besides the fact that he does not desire the outer world, which are just a reflection. Not only does he not want the superficial world, he doesn't even want the reflection of the divine there. He wants to go straight to the source itself, to be encompassed in the source. Recognizing that all of existence is obviously external, superficial. And even the divine energy in existence is a reflection, a mere reflection. And that the real truth is the God that is before and after and all equal. The student doesn't want even the reflection, wants the core, the source itself.
Is that why we whisper Baruch Shem usually?
It's because the malachim was not.
The Malach and Yom Kippur is different, but I don't know, it doesn't, you want to say interpretation, maybe. I don't know. Good. So now we're at the stage of Nadav and Avihu. You completely want to be encompassed in the source. In the healthy sense of it, what happens now, you think you just go upward. When you arrive, when you come, in this state of yearning and longing and reaching to Atzmus, the state of Atzmus, Ozu Davka Hashuv, then specifically and explicitly has to be the Shuv, the return. That comes after Baruch Shem, you cannot remain there. Because the Kavanah of Atzmus is to go down, he doesn't want you to stay there. The Hainu, the Heichen Weitzim B'chinas Atzmus, is a B'Teva. Because where do you find Atzmus? It's in Teva. And here he means Teva as it's given down below.
So that means that your expiring will not get you to Atzmus unless you have the Shuv and you go through Teva.
I would put it the other way around. That when you go to Atzmus, and your sense is Kavanah, you go return.
And you trip up.
If the Kavanah is a mitzvah, if you're completely consumed by God's Kavanah, not by your own longing, mistake with Sumrid is that they became too much about that. If the kavanah is amitis, like then they will recognize it's not my pleasure that I have being here. It's what God wants to happen, how He wants me to go. So the shuv comes next, the ultimate bittul. As we said, the bittul, like I tell you, the bittul is also not with complete selflessness. It's an element of your soul. You also have a self involved, and that's where the problem is.
That's how, but it's a problem. Neither Yira or Elah.
These are all your own complications. It doesn't say that here. Just remember that.
Like superhuman effort.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want to say that's not the words it's using.
So Hechan Moitzin, doesn't that imply that where do you find it?
Yeah, because Atzmus wants Torah. Oyed Dvar Mehel is referring to returning to the world and following the life of Torah mitzvahs on earth, Shuv. So the giving of Torah down below.
And thereby acquiring Atzmus in some way, shape, or form.
That's where Atzmus is found. That's his kavanah of Atzmus. That's what he wants. That's where he is embedded in himself. It's like Dira B'Tachtein, but here it's saying Torah. V'zeu tachas hakavanah ba'arotzei. We're reading. And this is the ultimate purpose in the This is the ultimate purpose also in the Ba'arotzei. She achrav shuv. That afterwards there should be a shuv. In other words, the Rotzei is not just to satisfy a soul's hunger. The Rotzei is in order that it should bring afterwards a shuv. Either because once you go upward, you get regenerated and new energy, or when you go upward, you sense the kavanah deeper. Whatever the reason is. But it's very easy to fall in the trap. I like this. Look, everybody, that's the trap of going into. The Meraglim didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. You want to stay in Koil, you want to stay in Yeshiva, you want to stay in the Lev didn't want to go out of the table once he was in there. You had to be commanded, stay in that table. You don't want to leave comfort zones. You do spiritual comfort zones. Especially a soul that's long. Now he goes back to Nozba Naviyu. Sorry, and the Rotze has to be in such a way. Now he's adding another component. That the lung has to be in a way that's achiza primis. Achiza beprimis, I'm not sure what it means. You could say several things. You could say like the poor people who went into the paradise. So what do we say? One died, one went mad, one became an apostate. Yeah, but keep a nichnas b'shalom, the yotz b'shalom. So why is it important to know nichnas? Because he went in a different attitude. That's why he came out. He went in with a deeper bit. Here I think achiza the previous means that it's not just for my own satisfaction. That it really achiza the previous that it really integrated the experience. See, the Rosei has two sides to it. You could be attracted to the light. You're living here, you're in darkness, or you feel weak, or you feel not weak, you feel thirsty. Now you have the source itself. That a previous achiza previous, or is it more a type of indulgence? I think achiza previous is not indulgence. That's what I think he means here. It types different ways also. You could say achiza previous. So the Ratzei by the first person is like almost, I don't want to compare it, but like someone who takes a psychedelic or takes some type of, it's not really there ready to go to that place. He took something that triggers a chemical that essentially forces you to go there. You didn't earn your right. Something you catapult to do something. There's an idea of chizur primis means a person, or you could type that the Ratzei itself is really integrated. Not positive how to touch it, but something in this direction. Probably can interpret it several ways. How the Ratzei is different. Achiza the prim is interesting.
Grasping. Hold.
That's another type. That's what. Yeah. That's another. You could say achiza the prim means that you're grasping, you're holding on to the Primis Dika Kavana of Atzmus. Right, so that's the real Primis Dika, because when you're Rotzi, when you're holding on to that Primis Dika Kavana,
Right.
then Deshiyah Achrov Shuv. That may even make it, that sounds even more shot.
Well,
Ach Benadav Aviyu, maybe you will understand it from the contrast. However, by Nadav Aviyu, the yearning, their longing was an aspiration of the spirit, and they didn't want the shuv. They didn't want the shuv. They didn't want the shuv, the hashuv. They didn't want to have part of the shuv or be part of it. Kim ba'rotze, okay, kim ba'rotze. They only wanted the rotze. That's all they wanted. They wanted to be encompassed, to want, to be, something is subsumed. They wanted to be subsumed. What does this subsumed and consumed? Subsumed sounds more like you, consumed means like you completely.
Subsumed means you melt in something. Consumed means that you are.
Swallowed up by it.
Yeah, right.
Okay, but they wanted to be subsumed basically. That's the right.
you want to be in the Shaman Atzmos again.
Well, yeah, that's when Ksuloi B'chinas Achiza B'Pnimis. See here it notices. And it was not by them in a form of Achiza B'Pnimis. Probably they didn't grasp the Pnimis of the Ratzei, of the longing, Achiza B'Pnimis. Or it wasn't the Pnimis inside of them. Again, you could touch it both ways. I'm not positive. But they both stem, they're both correct. And that's why their yearning and their longing and their consumption, and their subsuming was a stalkus on nefesh. The nefesh expired. Guf nishel kain, what you said before. The body. No. You did?
Yeah.
Was it?
You didn't.
He does that a lot.
Yeah, I went both. I did both. No, what do you say?
These are Pnimis.
Yeah, let me go again. The Heichem Mitzim of Zed. The Zed Tachas HaGoren Barosh Yachar of Shuv, V'tzach L'Zaratz, Bev Gezeshim, Konzachid Pnim, V'desh Yachar of Shuv. Kim read that. Now, however, another Yohei Arotz, B'chlis Arotz, Shalei Rotz, B'ashuv, Kim Barotz. V'etzlem Shalei B'chinas Achiz B'Primis. Now, V'akein Ba'arotz Shalem, and that's why in their longing, V'yistalkus HaNefesh, their Nefesh expired, V'aguf Nishra Kayim, the body remained intact.
What's the importance of telling us about the body?
I'm trying to think why. Maybe he's trying to say because if the body went with them, at least they elevated it. Here they completely ignored the body, so to speak. In other words, there was no shuv. It's like someone who's fasting and ignoring the body in order for their spiritual satisfaction. That's one way to type it.
And also maybe
I'm not sure exactly why. One second.
This is proof that they expired, that the nefesh expired.
I'm saying, but what is important to emphasize? Hagruf Nishel Kayim means almost that they ignored it, basically. That's what I think he's trying to say.
This is the difference between subsume and consume.
Maybe.
If you consume, you wouldn't have your body intact.
That would have been better. That would have been better.
No, but they were still lacking the shoe.
And then like Moshe Elio.
I think
Basically means that
it sounds to me like an
the soul
ignorant.
was drawn to the godliness, and it was the body was made.
Yeah, but what's why? And let's say the body was not kind. The body burned up.
So that's then would be
And there would be no opportunity for shoe.
They got burnt by the fire. The fact that
They weren't there. They wants to emphasize that they
It was
weren't
only the
there.
Shabbat that was drawn. It was only the nefesh that expired.
But there, it wasn't the problem wasn't their
That's
rotzer, the problem was their
body.
shoe.
It didn't affect the body.
You mean to say it wasn't just a physical burning? That's what you're saying.
Because if you read the psukim, so maybe they got burnt.
Okay, maybe that's what he's saying. He's saying is basically, in other words, it's not like they died from a fire. Fire.
That's very important to distinguish.
They died from a spiritual ecstasy, and the body. In other words, if the body had burned up, you could say they died because they got too close to the fire.
Call us an effort.
No, that's not close.
I mean,
No, not that. He's saying not that. You could say somebody goes and the fire suddenly, let's say, it consumes you. So you die from the physical fire burning up your body. Here, the death was because their soul was so intense. That's why the body remained intact. The body was not damaged.
Interesting though what
That's
Rashi
what he's
says.
saying. That's what he's
But
saying.
it's interesting what Rashi says.
Maybe that's what. Maybe that's
That
true.
is. The body would have been burned.
But the whole idea of Ratzu Yishuv, when you have a Ratzu, you have to have a body to have a Shuv. So you have to have a body to have a Shuv.
Yeah.
So therefore, the Ratzui wasn't the problem. The problem was they didn't have the Shuv in their Ratzui.
No, they were too far going to go back.
Yeah, but this line, okay, but Rochlan may stalkus hanefesh. The guf nishul kain.
Right.
Technically, the body remained intact, so it was definitely a spiritual accident. But also, the result was that they never returned to the body.
They got stuck up there.
So that's the chet. I understand. And this was their sin. That they had a yearning, a longing without a return, without integration.
He's saying the body was there for the thing. They could always come back. They could have always come back to their body.
Right.
It wasn't damaged in any way.
Who said this?
That's what he's saying.
Who said?
Pinchas.
They never did.
That was their head. That the body was there for the taking. They should
Oh, that's why he's saying that the guf nishukayim.
Yeah, it's very important that the Guf
I
Nishul
don't know. You can say what you said. That you're saying he's pushing to Balbat to Shibshan. No, like like that. Yeah, he's saying, Bob, I don't know if it's a contradiction. You could say all the above. I'm not sure if there's anything conclusive. He's saying basic simply. But who says they died from Klei Nefesh? Maybe they died because of fire. They got too close to the fire. They got burned alive. Dead. They burned alive. You're basically saying that these Talkas Nefesh. Varai, the Guf, Nishakayim. So in other words, you see it, Guf, everything is healthy, and suddenly the person is dead. How did that happen? Because the soul expired. Deeper, obviously, it means that their body, the chet is that they didn't return to they did not engage the body. There was no integration. The bottom line is there's no integration. Even if that's that line, but the Havana and the whole Indian is Shitasa, you like Rashi. Shad. The Havana is saying,
But since it was
no, it's not
Shad is since Shad is the body's intact, I mean, how do you?
we were just wondering what these lines
Yeah,
had.
yeah,
If you
that's
didn't
it.
say about Guf Nishukayim, what would be missing?
Right.
So I think we covered it.
Yeah.
It's all right, all true. All the above. So there's Ratzi B'lai Shuv. V'nistaknu Aydei Pinchas. Now, they were repaired through Pinchas. Their chet with Pinchas. What did Pinchas do they didn't do? She'etzle Mesiris Nefesh B'Pel Mamish. He had Mesiris Nefesh B'Pel Mamish. He gave his soul, his life, B'Pel Mamish, Mesiris HaGuf. He gave his body, he put himself at risk. The Zen Gufo Hayim Mitzvah, Shu Inyan Kiddush Hashem B'Pel Mamish. That itself is a mitzvah. In other words, by the Nadav, there was no mitzvah what they did.
That's why he's saying.
It's true that you need to have After Chol Ma'idach. There's no mitzvah. By him, and by Pinchas, he sacrificed himself.
That's
Let's say Mesiris HaGuf. And that Guf is a mitzvah, the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. What did he do? Let's go to the story. You had the story there with Zimri, and he went and he saw that to kill Hashem, so he killed them. That's Mesiris Nefesh because he could have been killed.
He actually was killed. It was just tendency that happened to him that day.
What?
It's well done that he was protected. But
That's what he's bringing out. Guf Nishakayim. Over there was the Guf was Nishakayim. Over here, but the point of the Shuv is the Mesiris HaGuf.
You could say a third thing with Nishakayim. Maybe that's like what he's saying. Guf Nishakayim, there was no change in the body. He sacrificed his body. They gave into their soul and they left the body to do whatever it has to do. He went.
That's why he says the words over here. That's obviously
He
the
could have been
difference.
physically killed.
It doesn't say just Mesiris and Nefesh B'Mamish. Who Mesiris HaGuf?
He care about
So
it.
lost to the Neshama. Like say my body,
That's for sure why. That's for sure why the Rebbe Shabbos. Because he says Mesiris Nefesh B'Mamish. For who Mesiris HaGuf?
I agree. So that's why it's always good to read on. Okay. Now we go back. And nevertheless, though he also had Mesiris Nefesh with his guf, it was the chiz b'primis. It was a chiz b'primis. What does he mean a chiz b'primis? Clearly a chiz b'primis means integrated in him. Or the kavanah. Because he didn't have Klei Nefesh b'Pel Mamish. He had Mesiris Nefesh b'Pel Mamish. In other words, he sacrificed himself. But Klei Nefesh, that the Nefesh should just expire, actually didn't happen by him. For example, that he's seen the Chil Hashem and said, you know what, this is so unbelievable. I want to just go into God and just see what it disappeared, and then he would have continued. He wouldn't have made a Kiddush Hashem. He would have died in his so-called ecstasy. You know, No, that's not what he did. He went and did something on earth, did it, and he did not place it. It's not his soul what disappeared. I mean, it's never very mitzvah the kind of same as well.
This is the mitzvah.
Yeah.
So that's
Mr. Snevers was the mitzvah. It was like he said right in the first line. That itself, by then the Mr. Snevers was for self, for their indulgence.
Selfish.
And here the Mr. Snevers was a mitzvah to the kind of God's desire.
The
So that's what he said before. By Krishna, okay, that's first day. But what happens next? If it's a chizuk b'pnimius, you're going to actually do what God wants, not what you want. And you're going to move to B'hai Dvarim to take the mitzvahs naturalized. By Pinchas, we saw that his dedication wasn't just to connect to God.
Karvosam.
It wasn't just, I want to connect to God, that's why I'm going to make a Kiddush Hashem. No, his kavana was what God wants, and that's why he did the mitzvah, and his soul didn't just disappear.
Wow.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's the whole idea. That would be like somebody, God sends you on a shlichus, and you get so excited by the shlichus that you expire, and you're supposed to go do something. Where did you disappear? I don't usually hear, go there. What are you doing here by me? That type of idea.
So good, I get feel guilty now.
Which madrega you want? We have a biblical problem. We don't have both issues. Not the Vavihu.
Our souls are expiring.
L'chein ha'yadei tikun chet, not the Vavihu.
Ha'yadei
L'chein ha'yadei tikun chet, not the Vavihu, right? And that's why through him was the preparer of the chet of not the Vavihu.
But is that the Pashta Pshat of Heshiv Es Chamasi?
He didn't finish we're going to learn.
No, I'm saying, what's a Chamasi?
He didn't finish. He's going to learn. We're going to learn. Why do you jump? But what we do know from this, going back to that Pshat in the Maimer, is the Iyu v'Gamui Echad, that they had was Iyu v'Chayu Echad. They didn't want to go into Gamui, basically. And Pinchas went into Gamui, the Kabbalah, to create, to bring it into existence. The Leila Toyu. So you can have Chayu remains up there, means the Chayu is going to the Blipo. You're not coming into Cave. I'm just trying to, because you did say Gamui Chayu, right? You did say that.
Yeah.
Chutzanis Aken. They didn't want to go into Chutzanis. He engaged with Chutzanis. That's the Kabbalah. Yeah, he just expired into EU, to Blipo.
You were taken.
Okay. Well, the Chen of it.
Well
And on this, he received, was given to him, rather, the reward. He was the reward of Dahinani Nesunloi, his Brisi Shalom. And here, behold, I give him my covenant of Shalom, of peace. How is that? Shalom is Yisod. Sheba Atzmus. V'hainu Shochas Atzmus. We learned at the end of the last paragraph. Remember, the others, the Harim, erode because till the Maila. You say Sheba Atzmus. This is Shleimid Leit Omer. What happened by Matan Torah? In other words, the others compared to Matan Torah, you can't say the others are like Nadav Aviv. They did their purpose, and they were. But bottom line is they focused more on the hair and the Maila and above. And here is the Yisrael Atzmus. So Bris Yishalom, he said Bris. Remember Bris Yishleimid. End of the last
Connection.
Bris is Yisod always. Discussion is the connection. He says that's Bris Yishalom. That's Yisod Shav Atzmus, I'm Shav Atzmus. Time day Mesiris Nefesh, or B'fram Mesiris Nefesh, B'fram Mamish. You see the interesting thing, he's calling B'fram Mamish here, not that he died.
Yeah.
You know, Mesiris Nefesh usually say B'fram Mamish means like Rabbi Akiva, he actually died.
Oh, no.
Here, he means Mesiris Nefesh, not just Mesiris Haras, that he dedicated himself, but he actually put himself at risk.
Sister Japan spoke on many even halacha that if you're actually ready, you're already on the gallows and all that, and something happened, you were saved, that's as if you died already.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm trying to say. So it's not just his, right. I'm saying because he had put himself at physical risk. And he was in a situation where he could have been dead. I'm saying that's the difference between Mesiris Nefesh and Mesiris Nefesh B'Pel Mamish. That's what I'm trying to say.
Wow.
Through Mesiris Nefesh, especially B'Pel Mamish, that a person actually acts. Shehi mitzvah. Again, so it's a mitzvah. Mesiris Nefesh is a mitzvah.
The fact that you were saved, it doesn't take away from the princess.
Mamshich b'chinas atzmus ein sev baruch.
No.
You draw down atzmus. So in other words, you need two things. You need klois hanefesh, but you need it to be a mitzvah that's God's kavanah, not yours. So another Aviv had one without the other. See what's going on here? You need Mesiris Nefesh to be a mitzvah, and be done as a mitzvah, not as a self thing. So they had the right intention, but they had the wrong. No, they had the right step, but they didn't have the right kavanah. Right, that's the point. Okay, here we go. Amshachi idea Teda. Shenikra Gam Ken B'Yisrael. The Amshachi, the drawing down of Atzmus, Esod Atzmus which is also called B'Yisrael. Teda is called covenant of peace. Ukidu Shateda Nikra B'Yisrael. It's known. The Teda is called this covenant. Because we lay B'Yisrael, Yom V'Layla. If you don't have my bris day and night,
which means if you don't learn Teda day and night,
which means bris here refers to not just on the Teda day and night. Yeah. Ksiv, ready? And that's bris. And the eye that it's shalom, because it says cholas v'ser shalom. So it's an eye that Teda is bris shalom. So what Pinchas got, number one, bris shalom interpretation number one is referring to Yisod of Atzmus. There's a chizbah Pinchas that's drawn down. Number two. He got Teda, as he said, the Teda Chasam Adama, where Atzmus resides, because Teda is both Bris and Shalom, the Shalom. Einashai, they had Teda, Amshachas Atzmus. How do you so reconcile with what he said? Why is Teda called Bris Shalom then? Because Teda is Yisod Atzmus, Yisod Atzmus, because Teda draws down Amshachas Atzmus. He doesn't explain it here, but like by Matan Teda you say, Anoichi, Anon Nafsh is Ksovis Yavis. God, Eisi Atam Leich, it says, V'yichuli Li, Truma. What's the pshat? That Teda has the etzem of Elikus. Yisrael Reisim contributed to Kulachad. Like he says in Tanya also. That Teda, now what is it in the Havana? That Teda, Prince Chochma, Prince Primis Ratzmis Remember, Bina Chitzenius is the Chitzenius of Ramui. But Teda is the level of Chochma, not just wisdom, but Primis Ratzmis I'm sorry. Teda is Chachma, and Pnimis Atzmus HaChachma, the inner core dimension of Chachma, of wisdom, Nimsha becomes Pnimis Atzmus Ein Sof. Kamoshi is blood, as we shall explain. Remember, we're talking about the interface. Chachma is going to become a vital component, because Chachma is that. Chachma, remember, especially Pnimis Chachma, is a keli for Atzmus Ein Sof, and that's Teda. So, in other words, so Teda is what he got as the reward. What is the meaning? That's because the reward that he received in Bris Shalom is the state of Bris Shalom, showing the Bris Shleim. That's the state of Bris Shleim. In other words, he got the gift of Teda, basically, the gift of Etzem. In other words, Schar Mitzvah Mitzvah. It's like he made the connected media. Because he gave us his effort because of the Etzem and didn't think about himself, so he drew down Atzmus. That's his reward. His reward is what he did. His dedication was to the Etzem. He wanted what Atzmus wanted, which was to bring it down as a mitzvah, not just for self-interest. And therefore, his reward was that Etzem. So what does it mean now that he subsided, he quieted, or he the Chamasi as my anger? Pilish Heshiv Hu'in HaShova. Heshiv comes from the word HaShova, to return something. V'hainu, what are you returning? Sheheshiv min hapilu de layichud. You return the tikkun of Nadav that you return from something that is divided, or I would say divisive, elayichud, to unity. So the pastors he's referring to that they created the divisiveness, not the Vaviyu. Or you could say Zimri, try to separate, Chil Hashem. I'm not sure yet. But bottom line is, we have to read till the end. Well, Bahashavi is based in Yon. And there's two things in this return. In other words, something, when you say, let's say, Hashav Aveda, what's the mitzvah of Hashav Aveda? Al Pi Kabbalah Chassidus is like this. Aveda is your own property. Adam Chas al Mamei. It's part of you. The Chasim is part of who you are. Part of your, as the Baal Shem Tov says, part of your Gerulim, part of the sparks that were allocated to you. When you lose something, so it says Ezu Sheta Ma'avim Mashanesim. So the Alter Rebbe teaches Ma Shanesim. He loses the Ma, the Lakus, the Bittul. So it means someone who's a fool, a person who loses what is given. Ma is from the word Chachma, like Chachma Ma Bittul. So what does it mean? That now something that was part of your life is now lost. Like Where's it lost? It's lost in a world that things are not aligned, because when everything is aligned, there's no Aveda, there's nothing lost. Everything is in its place. The idea that it's lost means it fell into a world of confusion, or you could say from Achdus became Pirut. Because when it was part of your life, let's say it was your home, or you wore it, or you owned it, it's part of your, it's integrated into your life. Once you lose it, there's a Pirut that is created, a split between you, the owner, and that. If someone returns it to you, they're basically bringing Achdus for Pirut. It's just an example of all the Avedas. It's like when we say Shabbos and weekdays. So Alma de Kruda, we call Biyar, is the world of divisiveness. Shabbos is called Olam Ha'Achdus, Atzilus. That's why you're not supposed to go out and carry something outside from Shus HaYachid to Shus HaRabim, because the thing that you're carrying outside, you're taking from the Achdus to Pirut. So all week long, we live in Pirut. So it's not quite Shabbos. You're in the domain is a holy world, and you're not supposed to go from Achdus to Pirut. That's what he says. That's Havarim Rishus L'Rishus.
Whoa.
No, that's why there's no Bidun. No, he's right. That's why there's no Bidun. That's why you're not supposed to go to work. Even though all week long you work, you bring money, you give tzedakah, Shabbos not. That's the answer.
No, but if you're outside, you can come. You
can't carry in something.
Can't carry it?
Carrying is carrying. It goes either way. It's Akira Hanacha either way. That's not.
But you're going from Pirut to Achdus.
But that's not Shabbos. That's not the reason. I just told you.
That's bitter.
That's bitter. That you're not allowed to do. That's the word bitter means that it means separating. You're not allowed to separate either way. Okay, why am I saying this? Okay, so bottom line, Hashavas Aveda, so to speak, so it'd be Meshiv. Don't say Aveda here, but the Eshiv is come on. That's Eshiv. I was saying Hashavah is based in Yarn. There's two things in this return. Im Hashavah min Apirud Lavad. You could say all you did was you took it out of the world of we'll call the divisive world. Or a deeper level that you actually, no, you didn't just do surmara. You didn't just so-called take it away from the negative forces. You could say it's no longer in a divisive reality, it's neutral. But didn't become part of Yehudi Yisbarach. It's a second, a higher level of shenichel, that you actually returned it to a place of the divine unity. The kana kavana sheheshiv b'chinas yichud mamash. Here the kavana in Heshiv es Kamasi, he didn't just get it back to the way it was before Zimri did the sin. And you could say, okay, you know what? They did something. Pinchas killed them. Everything is over. Heshiv Kamasi is saying it's not just he achieved something greater, the Kiddush Hashem that he created. That's why he got this reward. He didn't just bring it back. So he did something. Remember we talked that only Torah has the power to transform darkness to light. Alvis only bring light into it. Chayur only brings energy. That's canal. That's only with the power of Atzmus to transform. And this was the reward. I give him my common shalom because it's Yisei Shabbatzmus. They give him Yisei Shabbatzmus. V'zeo Shamar b'medrash. Okay, so what do we know from this Heshiv Chamasi? We still don't know what Chamasi means. We just know that the Heshiv, he connected it to what? The question in the beginning of the Maimon was what? What's this Kabbalah Schar? And what's this Ma'u the Hashav the Heshiv Chamasi? Okay, so Heshiv Chamasi, he did something. Well, first of all, in repairing, Pinchas did a few things here. Number one, he took a situation was a Chil Hashem and turned it a Kiddush Hashem. So that's right there, transformation. He didn't just get rid of the evil, he made a Kiddush Hashem for the Klal Yisrael. With that, he got that reward. Second thing he did, he repaired the Chet of Nadav Avihu. They were self-indulgent in their spiritual search, seeking, longing. He did it as a mitzvah and it transformed. It was a Chizah Primis and so on. So those things are all not just Heshiv, that he just eliminated, but he also reconnected, transformed. He transformed the divisive situation into a unity. He's not saying here whether he's referring to another Vavi or Zimri, but clearly he did something. I'm mentioning both because that's the fact. Now he's saying, "V'zeu sham b'medrash meishiv chema The one who was the son or grandson of Aaron, he quieted the anger just like quieted the anger of a son of someone who quieted the anger through the incense, through the ketevos. What's the connection? In the Yud Aleph Samon Yevteres, you do 11 spices, types of spices. So no, she neged Yud Aleph Ksod. They correspond to the 11 crowns of Klippa.
Wow.
So in Kedusha you have 10. In Klippa you have an 11th because there's an 11th hovering power that gives Klippa power.
Wow.
So it's really transferred. So basically saying Ketevos is a sapach. The in Ketevos is a sapach. Ketevos, when you take the samamonim, by the way, the samamonim are like perfume. What does perfume do? It takes toxins, or it takes gas. It could take something that is a very negative, like water or other things that don't have a positive smell, and turn it into a beautiful smell.
A French shower.
Okay. So Ketevos is a sapach. You take the Yud Aleph samamonim. That was the whole point of Ketevos, to take 11 different spices that were all coming from the world of Klippa and transform it. Kamoy Kain Pinchas, so that's a connection. That's why it says, what's the time? Because what's the connection between Pinchas and Aaron? So just like Aaron, so same thing, Kamoy Kain Pinchas, like the grandson, also Heshiv's Chamosei, Shunya Nepach, Sheradan Nepach L'Tev. So just like Aaron through Ketevos did it, so his grandson also did the same idea. He had that power to transform darkness to light, or evil to good. The reward of this is the Bris Shalom, is the covenant of peace. So that Teda, Yisod Shabbatzmus. The Zero Pinchas ben Elazar. This is also the meaning Pinchas ben Elazar. The Pinchas had Mesiris Nefesh by Mamish. So by Pinchas was actual Mesiris Nefesh. They gave it ready to give his life. But it was in the form of a Chizba Pnimius. It was internalized, integrated,
grounded.
The grounded, the Gufa Hayamitzvah. And that itself, that he did it, was also a mitzvah. Keep adding that. Like they say, Heshem es Chamosim, through this, Heshem es Chamosim, not just he subsided, quieted it, he transformed it. Heshem from the word Taketshuv. We said before, like he returned to Taket, like he transformed, the anger, he transformed it into light.
He turned away the anger.
And that's why I gave him I will give him this piece of this covenant of peace. This is such of Atzmus, the Bris, that the Hamshachas should be Atzmus down below.
That's what the all comes to every Bris.
That's good. Pinchas Elio.
Yeah. By the way,
we have a fish
I'm
on the table.
making a bris Tuesday, man.
There you go. All connects.
Can you expand on this meaning of schar? I mean, if Pinchas went with the Mesiris Nefesh, he certainly didn't do it for the schar. Therefore,
you have this thing called midah connected midah. Schar mitzvah mitzvah. Often reward, in most cases, all cases, reward is of the thing that you did. So when you do something, you get reward in the. Pinchas had the strength or the presence of mind, however you want to put it, maybe due to his grandfather Aaron, to do what another Vavi did not have presence of mind. That's what he's saying essentially. And that was to be able to go to a great height of Mesiris Nefesh and not get consumed by it, or subsumed, and keep in mind God's kavanah, mitzvah, keep grounded. That brought him a Hamshachah that only comes through such Aveda, which is Hamshachah of Atzmus, that is Bris Shalom, which we learned before in the previous mindset, is the power to transform existence. So he got what he did. He got more of what he did, essentially. So it's evolved in that way. So the reward is directly commensurate with what is the work. Although another Vavi, you could say at best, brought a Gilead into existence. They did not transform. The contrary. They left it alone, they went their way. So they don't have Hamshachas Atzmus. You don't get Hamshachas Atzmus if you don't put yourself aside. It's almost like saying Toyu is a higher energy than Tikkun. But because it's consumed with its own Gilead, it doesn't have the essence. Tikkun, you have a Gilead essence that Toyu doesn't have because the Kavanah.
Or his cousins.
Would you say it's fair to say, would you say it's fair to say that whatever you can do with a Ratzui, the schar for the true Mesiras Nefesh that Pinchas had is even greater than what he could have reached with his Ratzui?
Well, you have to say that the schar was more than because of the, what God granted to him if he wasn't. But then, let's put it this way: he did an act, and God not given him a reward. He would have been a one-time act. He granted Pinchas, I guess, for history, forever, the power to continue the mapshah, this hamshachah, till this day. So in a sense, when we are able to transform, it's somewhat to the power that Pinchas got that Bris Yisrael. It wasn't just our personal reward. It was basically Pinchas becomes the symbol of this type of Bris Yisrael. I mean, regardless, you need to have a type. What was the reward? What did Pinchas get exactly? What benefit did it have generationally?
He became a Kohen then.
So why is that a reward?
Why the Rebbe would express it as Yisod Shabbat's.
That's the Lashon of Bris. Bris is Yisod. And the past, if you look in the earlier chapter, the previous paragraph, it's a big arichas. Yisod Shabbat's as opposed to Yisod Shabbat's. The obvious is Yisod Shabbat's. It doesn't go down Lamata Mata. Yisod Shabbat's goes all the way to Mata Mata. Basically, Yisod Shabbat's is most likely is Yisod of the 10 hemispheres. But or means the power, the asmistic foundational power to transform. It's a power, it's an asmistic power to transform. That's what it looks like from previously. It's essentially the Chiddush of Matan Torah. It's just another way of putting it. The Seyd is, he doesn't elaborate a lot, but that's what he says. So we'll do the Kitzur, right? Kitzur, Dei Machsede, Yet the Mechuv Lash. Enough to fill the lack, but you're not responsible, not obligated to make him wealth. What's Asher? Asher is Zah, Sheyesh Lekesav Rav. In Hey Alman, Tov Alman Dichsufin. So what is Asher? Is Zah, the Midas, but has Kesav Rav, from Atik, as we'll soon see. There's an abundant silver. Those are the 400 worlds of silver. And it's Evel L'Seichel. That's the commodity. What do you call it? Capital that is used in the merchants. Seicher Iguli Arich. Seicher the Makifim, the circles, the spheres of Arich. Evel Seicher Atik. Ein Nosher El B'das, Das Elyon, Shemam Shukwa Primis HaKesef. Ein Nosher only Das, because Das, Elyon, draws down from inner Kesef. So Das is Osher Kesef.
Unlimited supply of capital.
Yeah. וזהו שהם הווי שנמשך במתן תרא, ואמס הווי. ואמס הווי, זה של ראש. What? So,
it's a play of words, but it's a violin.
Yeah. So that's Shem Havai that was Nimshal Mantei, that's Shidduch, the wealth, and Emes Havai. Why does it bring Emes? I'm not really sure, but Emes is usually Tiferes. The Ovis Himshichu Shem Shadeh. The Ovis, however, they drew down Shem Shadeh. And that's why the main revelation by them was above. He has it in the present. Nevertheless, it was still a preparation of the Matan Torah. How do you read it without the parentheses? That's what I understand. You could give the Matan Torah. Doesn't make sense.
It started the possession. It started the.
I guess this is a parenthesis you have to read. You cannot not read it.
Or the parentheses should end after the Matan Torah.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably does end after Matan Torah.
That would be less sensible. The context. Unless
you were saying before that it didn't say that straight out that it's Achon. The Kitzur
is the beginning of the Yichud.
Right.
This is the meaning of Harim Musha that the mountains will erode. Huh? Will move. Musha move. And the Bris Yishalom Leitamit. However, the Bris Yishalom, my covenant of peace, will not Leitamit, will not budge. Yisei Sheba'atzmus, what's Bris Yishalom? Yisei Sheba'atzmus, Shanim Shechad Lamata. That's Yisei Sheba'atzmus, Bris, explaining that all the way, drawn down, all the way below. V'zeh Pinchas Bris Yishalom, and this is Pinchas the Bris Yishalom, but another of you, Hayarotzi B'lai Shuf. Another of you was a yearning, a longing without a return, without integration. But Tikkun Tzarech Liyas, Rotz B'shuv, Hashem Echad, B'sis Nefesh, V'achas HaGvayet V'mil. And Tikkun, that's Toyim. He's already saying that, basically hinting. In Tikkun, where it's supposed to be, the way is like Loyla Toyavar, El Shavas Yitzhara, you need Hashem Echad, Mesiris Nefesh, correct? But then you need Hayat V'Ram Eila. Well, Pinchas Tikkun, Ayadei Mesiris Nefesh, B'Pel Mamish, Ayadei Mesiris Nafshe, B'Pel Mamish. We get the mitzvah, he repaired them through his Mesiris Nefesh, an actual, which was a mitzvah. That's why he was given this shalom. This is saying that Atzmos to transform. Okay, we finished the Maimer 39, chapter 157. We did now pages 310, 311. We're ready to enter into Maimer 40, which will be Matis, the bottom of 311.